Exciting, exciting. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Sacramento Public Library YouTube channel. I'm Monica. I'm one of the librarians at Sacramento Public Library, where books are just the beginning. Today on No Book Club, No Book Required Book Club, we have our special guest and panel or presenter today. Samia is going to present how to find your art style. Hello, welcome.
Hi, thanks for having me. I'm so excited to be here and to talk about this. This is a very dear subject to my heart. So hi, I'm Samia. I'm a writer, artist, and editor based in New York, and I've been making art all of my life, and I'm a total nerd for it. So the goals for today, I'm going to talk to you about what art style is, how to study it effectively, and give you some tools that will allow you to explore your own style. When I was growing up, I'm not that old, I'm 28, but you know, when I was starting to pursue art seriously, I was very obsessed with finding my art style. I think that's a very normal thing to be obsessed with when you're interested in art, but it is a very weird thing when you don't know how to go about it, and it can be very frustrating. So I'm hoping that after today, it will be a less frustrating and in fact fun journey for you all as you go out into the world and seek your own art style. So this will be sort of an interactive lecture style thing followed by a Q&A. So if you don't have pencil, paper, brush pens, as Monica has, I know, things to draw and write with, please grab some because you might want to take notes, and there's also going to be some little exercises you're going to do for yourself.
Cool.
So yeah, go.
I was just going to ask, if I don't have a fancy pen, is a regular pen okay? Like a regular pencil? Do I need anything fancy right now?
You don't need anything fancy. We're pretty much going to be making lists and writing down goals for ourselves and things like that. Something that you will be able to use after this.
Awesome.
Yeah. So before we start, something I want everyone to just ask yourself briefly is, what's one issue you've had regarding your art style? And you may have something in mind. There may be some personal thing you've come up against already, and maybe that's why you're here right now. But here are some freebies if you don't know what to write down for yourself. Maybe you don't know where to start finding your art style. Maybe you're feeling like you don't have the skills you want and you're something's not there yet. You're not satisfied with it. Maybe you don't know what you like. It's kind of a weird thing. You may like art and you don't know why, and we're going to talk about that. Maybe you haven't thought about what you want to make or what you feel like making, and maybe what you like to make and what you are making don't quite match. Or maybe you just can't find art you like. Maybe it's a theory. It's I would love to be a good artist, but what does that mean? I have no idea. So these are some things that you can think about for yourself. There we go. So I want you to write down for yourself. I'll give you a minute or so. What's one goal you have for yourself regarding art style? What do you want to know coming out of this? And if it's not something I cover, or if it's something that you need more explanation on, we can talk about it afterwards.
So I'm thinking sometimes when I make art, I want to make it, but then I get frustrated that it doesn't look exactly how I picture it in my mind. When I've made art with my friends, they're especially when we were in middle school and high school, it would be you expect it to be good right away.
Right. Yes. Yeah.
So there's some things I'm thinking.
I feel like that's definitely super common, and something that I'm excited to be able to talk about today is how you look at what you like and study it in a way that you can work towards that result for yourself. Because I feel like it's very common that what we want to do is so different from what we feel like we can do. And maybe it's because we're not approaching it in a way that's kind to yourself, but also the result that you want. So I'm going to share a little bit of my art, which I don't find this cringy per se, but this is old art for me. So please know that this is not something I'm necessarily proud of. But a lot of this is from my sketchbook a couple of years ago. And I'm really proud of looking at this and seeing where I am now, because art is a journey. It is something that is going to change over time, and you can't be too hard on like the parts of it you don't like, because the fact that you put like pen to paper is a huge thing in itself. And so I like showing a little bit about my old art, because it's like a record of me trying. All your art is going to be a record of you trying and working through the things you like. I liked anime, I liked colors, I liked different sorts of like media. So all of this is like stuff I was working through, figure drawing, things like that. And my work now is very different and still evolving. And I do a lot of different types of stuff. I do digital work, I do marker art, do watercolor. So this is like only my digital stuff. But these are my gouache paintings. I really like anime. I love fan art, y'all. It's my happy place. So these are like incredibly detailed paintings that I started making last year because I wanted to combine fan art with doing a little bit of like something more fine artsy, something more painterly, which to me means like a lot of brush strokes, a lot of textures, using gouache paint, which is sort of, it's a water-based paint that is a little bit thicker. So you can get really bright results from it. And lately I've been doing fruits and animals because I find them very soothing, and we kind of need soothing things lately. I don't know if anyone's noticed, but go to your comfort media for sure.
So still gouache paintings. Looks like it's still gouache painting, just a different subject matter.
Exactly, different subject matter. And subject matter and media and what you like are all the things that are going to like eventually combine to you creating an art style. So today we'll talk a little bit about what an art style is, the subject matter, the media itself. I have some short little videos that are going to show some process of maybe using different types of stuff. How to study an artist's style so that we can actually approach what we like and try and figure out how to replicate it and ultimately create our own style. And then we'll do a practical exercise that will make it easier for you to walk out of this with some sort of achievable goals.
Okay. Yeah. One of our teens, Hattie, wants to know if you do classes, Samia.
Oh, that's such a sweet question. I currently don't, but it is something that I think I eventually want to do because I love talking to people about stuff like this. So, but for anyone who, I will put my social media at the end, for anyone who ever has like a question about anything art related, anything media related, I'm a total nerd about this stuff. So you can always ask me questions on social media. I answer everything, truly. So yeah.
Awesome. All right. Yeah, let's see what you have for us today.
Yeah, so let's talk about like what an art style is, because this is just very abstract. One definition of style is the specific and recognizable way an artist portrays the subject matter, including the way they utilize color, form, composition, and technique with a specific medium. Okay, so, you know, that's kind of a loaded term, but it is accurate. And here's why. Because styles are just really combinations of three things when you break it down. It's the other styles you like, it's the subject matter you pick, and it's the medium you use. Once you have those three things together, you're already on the road to having your own style, because you are picking three different things in a combination that not everybody is going to pick. So it's really not that bad once you break it down. So let's talk about the subject matter. What do you like to draw? I would like you to take a moment to write down what you just generally like to draw, one or two or three things, any number. Some examples would be still lifes, which are like the fruits that I painted before, vegetables, random objects that you find, anything that is sort of like an object in life, portraits of people, human beings. You could draw from photos of people, you could draw from life. If you have a friend who poses for you, you could use them as reference. Pet portraits. I love drawing animals. It's not something I used to do, but there's something very soothing about it. So maybe you're doing pictures of pets, or maybe you're doing pictures of animals in nature. You can do landscapes of nature, anywhere in the world. You can find a lot of stuff on Google Maps and Google Street View if you want to do some like urban settings, which is very cool. Maybe you like comics. Maybe you actually like drawing very simple, like stylized characters and doing caricatures and telling little stories with them. That would be comics. And then another thing that we don't always think about is fashion illustration. You know, maybe you just like designing cool outfits. Maybe you're drawing characters just because you want to style what they're wearing. That's totally cool too. So thinking about the subject matter you like will help you go towards what you want to draw. Many masters use combinations of one or more of their favorite subject matter. Van Gogh did like landscapes, but he wasn't willing to go about it in the usual way, hence things like Starry Night that are using very sort of like impressionistic brushstrokes, a lot of like different colors to create the idea of a night sky over a city. It's not photorealistic, but he's still starting from landscapes and paint. That's what he liked, right? And the way he applied paint also changed how the outcome is. Piet Mondrian, which is the upper left, very graphic painting for anyone who might not know. I don't know how much art history everybody here knows, so I don't expect you to. He liked graphic shapes and color. That was it. That's everything he liked. A lot of his work from the period that this particular piece comes from looks kind of like this, and that's okay. So you might, you know, want to draw a couple together like Klimt, but you might want it to be very graphic and very surreal. You know, you might want to use different types of media, paint, and then maybe some gold leaf. You can mix and match all the things you want because that's what masters do. And that's what contemporary artists do. This is a smattering of artists I follow on Instagram. This is very much to my taste. So just so you know, you may have been able to tell already. But some artists like using watercolor and they like happy, simple two-dimensional shapes. They like fan art. Maybe they just like faces. You know, who cares about the rest of the body? Let's just do faces and heads and make it kind of weird, right? Maybe they like fan art and maybe they like cacti. Any of these things is totally reasonable as long as you're picking something you like. So that's the subject matter piece of it, which I think can be the easiest part. Now we're going to talk about the medium. I hope this will be entertaining. You should choose tools you enjoy when you are experimenting with your art style, and you should experiment often. There's a number of different art supplies out there. There's different ways to create something beautiful, to create a piece of art. This is just a list off the top of my head of everything I can think of. And I will tell you that my personal favorites are marker, watercolor, ink and pen, gouache paint, and there's another one, colored pencils. I love colored pencils. But I've experimented with all of these actually because I came from a fine arts background where my program made us take classes in every different type of art. So I've done oil painting, I've done acrylic paint, I've done block printing, I've even done sculpture. All of those things were fun. I ultimately decided they're not necessarily for me, but I got something valuable out of doing them. So I would suggest if there's something you're curious about, like try it, you know, always try it out. Monica, what do you like to use?
So I like to use mainly pen and marker. I like pen and marker. I do a lot of collage work. And I like tactile. I like ripping things and gluing things and pasting things. And then I've come fondly of like the brush pen. I like the weight and the way that the marker moves because it's like you have like a brush style and then outlining because I'm a comic kid and I like outlining and there's a nice little felt tip. It's like going that. And then before we move on, so we have a teen who was wondering who were the artists and can we get a list of the artists that you had shown at the end of your presentation?
Sure.
Artists you had tagged.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I'll keep that in mind. But yeah, those are like the three I like the most. And doing acrylic. Lots of acrylic. Oil is you need patience to do oil, but I also think you need patience to do acrylic paints.
Yeah, I think a lot of people think that oil paint is the hardest, but I find them all difficult just in different ways. And it just kind of depends on what you like. Oil dries a lot slower. That's part of why I think people think it's harder. But to me, it's easier to sort of adjust things when you're using oil paint, whereas acrylic dries so fast because it's more of a plastic paint that I
Yeah.
feel like once I do something, I'm sort of like stuck with it. And I'm like, now I have to paint over it. Like, can't blend it, you know?
Yeah.
So it's interesting. The type of media you use does like change your experience. And you might be someone who loves that it dries fast. And you might be someone who never wants it to dry. And that's probably going to change what you like, right?
Mm-hmm. Ooh.
So here's some swatches. Love
Color
swatches.
theory.
Love swatches so much. So there's watercolor on the left and Copic markers on the right because these are my favorites. That's the only reason this slide is here, truly. But just to explain why I like Copics and why I like watercolors is I like how bright they are. This is true of gouache paint too, although there's not a slide for that here. I like how bright they are. I like not having too much black in my work because I feel like it can just dull the colors that I'm using. I think the colors that I like using look more vibrant when I'm using like dark blues and dark purples. And Copics blend really smoothly. I'm going to show a little bit of process. And watercolors layer really nicely, which is why I like those. Every media is going to have a slightly different language in how it works, which is also why I think it's very important to experiment and to have some fun. Video time.
Yes. This is cool. I'm really excited to see. This is like it's like ASMR for me, like just watching artists blend and paint.
Yeah, well, I love
so
watching
cool.
art videos. It's so soothing, right? So these are short videos that I tore from my social media, spoiler alert, which is why they're going to have funny captions on them. But I will also talk about like why I'm showing them. These 3 videos are all Copic marker processes in 3 different stages. I use Copic markers a lot to make very anime style art that blends pretty smoothly. I like that you can put down a darker color and then with a lighter color sort of blend things out and get kind of that smooth gradient. It makes the shadows really subtle. It makes everything just like feel very nice. And I especially like doing hair with Copic markers because you can blend some parts of it and get that smooth shine, but you can also use the brush tip to have harder edges. And then it creates sort of that like harsher shine that you will see in some anime. And I like doing this with the edges of clothing too, like I did on his blazer. And then the other thing I really enjoy doing with Copics is I like layering colored pencil over them. So colored pencil adds a really nice texture. And instead of using just black to outline, I have found that sometimes using a very like sharp pointed colored pencil gives everything a nice edge that sort of recedes a little bit instead of being very bold and at the forefront. And then if I want something to pop, like his eyes, for example, I can use a lot of darker colors around his eyes and then get sort of that crisp edging like around the shirt and things like that. So this is how I personally like to use markers. And also, like for anyone who's interested in alcohol-based markers, Copics are alcohol-based markers. That's how they're made. There's a lot more brands on the market now than there used to be. And when I was buying markers, I was sort of stuck with that and like Prismacolor, right? Like those were the 2. But now there's so many brands that are doing much more affordable ones. So if it's something you want to experiment with, it's not a super expensive media the way it used to be, which is kind of nice. Copics are refillable. So just like a note on environmentally friendly materials, it's nice that the ink is refillable because then you're not throwing away a plastic marker every time it runs out. You're just refilling it with a cartridge of ink, which they sell separately. And you can refill a marker up to about 10 times, I think. So for me, it's much more cost effective because I use these a lot. But if you don't know if you're like married to this yet, then it might be something to get a cheaper version of it and then see if you like it. And then you could always invest later. So that's some marker work. Wait, now we're going on.
No, it's great. I love that you're using like colored pencil to blend. I would have like my mind is like yeah, because you don't have those hard edges and it's a little bit softer unless you wanted to like build a mood or a theme. Like that's amazing.
yeah, thank you. When I first thought of it because of an artist we're going to look at in a little bit when we study some art styles, but Yeah, I'd never thought of it before, but it solved this problem that I was having over and over, which is like I was using black line art and I was getting portfolio reviews from like different people or when I was applying to grad school. And the note I kept getting was like, you don't have to outline everything. And I was like, but I like outlines. Like I want to outline
It shows
everything.
that the subject is separate from the background. Like,
Right, exactly. I like crisp edges.
yeah.
But then using a colored pencil, I actually started using colored pens for a bit and that like helped, but sometimes they were too light. But colored pencil, you can pick a dark color because there's so many of them. So that ended up just like working better. So yeah, something fun to experiment with. I use colored pencils also in my gouache paintings, like this one that I'm going to show you all. Two-step, two stage of my paintings here. This is one of my big gouache paintings. What I like about gouache is that it lays down really thick and you can outline like edges of things in it or put down darker colors. And then when you put the lighter colors, similar with Copics even, you can blend some of that out, but it's a much deeper color. Copics are always going to show a little bit of the page through it. They're always going to be a certain amount of like white showing through, which is fine. It's what makes them kind of luminous because they're ink. Whereas gouache paint is just so thick that you can layer it and then you get these really crisp edges, like the pink cherry blossoms in the background or the edge of her red hair. Like this stuff just like, it pushes itself forward and you can create a really nice sense of space with the shapes of colors in your composition instead of just with outlining. And then if you want to make more details like pop through, you can just outline the eyes again with colored pencils or things like that. Outline any of the details that you want, but you know, you still get those edges. So I find that like pretty fun.
Is that the palette on the bottom, like the colors that you're using for
Yes, it
the
is.
project? Okay.
I'll play it again, actually. Yeah, so for these, I just really liked the idea of like being able to have like my swatches as be part of it. So I taped off everything and I put tape in between each area so that when it's done, you get this like this nice row of like clean edges.
Oh, and it's so satisfying to peel the paint.
I love that. Yeah. As a side note for technique, if you are somebody who likes taping off edges and likes clean edges, I use washi tape. I just get like inexpensive washi tape or artist tape, which is usually like this kind of beige color, and they sell it at most art supply stores. And it doesn't tear the paper as much as like painter's tape or other things, so that you peel it carefully. You know, don't peel it too fast. But you get that nice edge, that very nice edge. Yeah. Washi tape in particular, because it's supposed to be decorative, it's a lot safer for paper than most tapes.
Yeah.
Like the stickiness is not as harsh on the surface of the paper. So yeah.
Yeah. And then who are the characters in the gouache painting?
Yeah. So this is, what's his name? Tomoe, there we go. Tomoe and I can't remember the girl's name, but they're from, I should know because this is one of my favorite series. They're from Kami-sama Kiss, which is Kami-sama Hajime Shite, I think in Japanese. The manga finished, the anime never got finished in the United States. Tears. There's 2 very good seasons on Hulu, and that's it.
I love them. For your it's like everyone be ready for your heart to be broken.
Yeah, it's a very good like sort of old Japanese folklore style shoujo romance. So it's like if Inuyasha was a shoujo with an ending. Inuyasha does technically have an ending, but it doesn't. It takes a while. It just takes longer. I don't know who gets that reference, but here we are. This next one is a piece I did in my sketchbook, and it's Yusuke from the anime Yu Yu Hakusho. And this is actually from just a screen cap of the anime. So I did a sketch in my sketchbook, and I outlined where I would want all the shadows. And then I made my gouache palette, and I mixed some of these colors, and then I just laid them down, and I got this like really nice, like bold result from his jacket, from his skin. And it's what's cool about doing sort of like a recreation of an image of like a screen cap is that you can see where the shadows are and actually study them and sketch out where they are. And then as you're doing it, you're learning the decisions that the animators made, right? So you're learning more about where shadows fall, or how cell shading and other kinds of shading works, where are the highlights. And you can use your own colors, or you can just try and replicate it, but both are useful for this type of exercise.
That's amazing.
And now, last slide of videos, spoiler alert, I'm going to show you some fruits, and then I'm going to show you a watercolor piece. So the two fruit pieces are also, oh wait, I didn't need to do that first. Sorry.
It's okay.
Well, we'll talk about the watercolor first. So the watercolor one, this is Geralt of Rivia from The Witcher, played by Henry Cavill. This is also from a screen cap from that show. I Googled him because I wanted to draw him and found this particular image. And I had drawn this before and I was not happy with it, like when I first watched the show. So a year later, drew it again. That's this piece. This piece is the redone one. And I decided to go about it much more carefully, and I wanted to use watercolor. And what I mean by more carefully is I planned my shadows more than I did before. I looked at the screen cap, and instead of drawing where all the shadows were, I used a very, very light blue watercolor to map where those shadows are on his face, because I knew that was like where I'd had trouble before. And by doing that, I knew that once I put the color of his skin tone over this, it would mostly go away, and I was going to have to redo the shadows, but I would be able to see where those shadows go. So it was like sort of a low stakes way for me to just like figure out where things are. And then I could put in this deeper purple to be able to darken it. And then when I put his skin tone over that, it sort of made everything a bit smoother, made it blend easier. And the thing about watercolor, it's a lot thinner than markers, and it's a lot thinner than gouache. And a lot of people find watercolor really difficult because it's hard to control. But if you can have a light touch with it, it is actually pretty easy to control because you get to build it up slowly. And that's the thing. A lot of people like rush into using it. But if you are just being sort of like thoughtful about moving around the painting, putting down your first set of shadows, then putting down your second set, you are able to build it up slowly, and you'll have more control over if you need a certain area darker. If you want to leave it lighter, then you're not going to touch it for a little bit. And with him, the challenge was also his hair is white and silver. And I didn't want to like put a bunch of gray in there and then be like, well, his hair is no longer white.
Yeah, like that's it.
Right. It's like game over. We're done now. Because with watercolor, you have to leave white of the page. So I was very careful about like putting some brush strokes of gray in his hair. And then I went over later, as you would have seen, with white gouache, actually, because again, gouache is thicker and it sits on top of the paper more easily. And I used a very small paintbrush to bring out some of those strands that had sort of gotten painted over when I was doing the background. And that brought his hair more to the forefront again. So you'll see that again in a little bit. I love using gouache for highlights when I have forgotten to leave space for highlights. It's my favorite thing.
And that hair just is like chef's kiss, like lovely, lovely.
It's just, so my favorite thing to draw is hair. Like I love it. I don't know why. So whenever there's a character with good hair, I'm like, yes.
Yeah, like shiny, highlight, color, form.
Yeah, exactly.
I know that's why I like drawing hair.
Yeah, the flowiness, it's just, it's so good. And all the different colors you can use to get the shadows and the highlights. Yeah. So now here's some fruits. So the reason why I find fruits really soothing is I can draw them in colored pencil and then the gouache goes over it really well, which is nice because it's just kind of satisfying to draw. But also with gouache, since you can build it up a little bit, you can really build up those subtle shadows really well. And for example, in the avocado, I'm going to play it again. Where there's more shadow, I actually used a purple over some of the green to make that area a little bit darker and to push some of those shapes forward. And I really find like this just an enjoyable part of using gouache, that you can get a little bit more like painterly with it when you're doing a still life like fruits or vegetables, because you can make it very three-dimensional without needing too much line work. And it kind of goes faster. So it's like a simple way to practice. It's satisfying to look at. And then I peel the tape and I have those clean edges again. And that is so great. And then here's another one, a little bit more of the same. This is a guava fruit. And it has this beautiful like coral sort of fruit when you peel it or when you cut it open. And I loved using that coral in the background as well as the front. And again, I built up some of those shadows in the lower part of the fruit. I got to use these like very poppy colors, and it just has this like really nice effect. And again, of just a nice way to practice something that's a still life and figure out your lights and your shadows, where you're leaving your highlights. And you get to learn a little bit more about like gesture and texture. Like, how are you going to get the shine of the fruit? You know, how are you going to get those like seed shapes? Do you want to abbreviate some of the lines on the leaves so that they're a little graphic, but we can tell what they are? Lets you work through some stuff in sort of a fun way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I remember being in art school, and like some of my art instructors would be like, you always work light to dark. And then my other professors were like, no, it's dark to light. Like, that's how you have to work. And watching your videos, it's like, well, you can do both. You can build up light in different ways. And it also depends on the medium.
Yeah, for sure. I'm really glad you brought that up, because this entire presentation in a way is a reaction to all the things I was told not to do in art school, or told to do in art school, as if there's one right way. There's sort of no right way as long as you're planning things out according to how you need to. Like, there are some pieces where I do enjoy working from the lightest area, because then I'm like making sure I leave it and I don't paint over it, because sometimes I go on autopilot and I paint the whole thing. I don't leave my highlights. But sometimes it's nice to build it up from the bottom. You know, and from the bottom, I mean the shadows. It just sort of depends on your subject matter, and it depends on like how you work and how you work with your medium, because that might change too. I think I work with my mediums a little bit differently, and I switch where I start depending on that. So we're going to talk a little bit about studying an artist's style. And the reason we're doing this is because if you study another artist's style, they've gone through all this troubleshooting, they've done all this testing, you know, in real time, and you can just look at the decisions they made. And if you like their style, you can work towards that and learn their visual language and then make it your own. And the thing is that, you know, I grew up with art teachers that said, oh, only use your own reference, only use live reference, you know, don't draw from photos, don't copy other people. And honestly, none of that helped me. It just stopped me from doing the things I needed to do to be able to learn my own style. And I think that studying how another person is making their work is just incredibly valuable and will help you. So styles change over time. You know, you saw mine, it changed a lot. It transforms, just like Sailor Moon. She didn't have just one form. No, there were multiple ones. This is a slide just for me. I will use any opportunity to make Sailor Moon a valid point.
You're totally okay. You are in the presence of like Sailor Moon fan. Continue.
Excellent. I knew I liked this place. I knew I liked it here. So one sort of genre of artist I like looking at is manga artists and how their styles have changed over the course of their publications, because they are working under very specific circumstances and their style is very public because we're all reading it as it's coming out, right? And so because they are working so rapidly to meet their deadlines, and we can talk about whether or not that's great for the creators, it's not always easy. But because they're working in that way, their style is developing faster and solidifying faster. And there may be subtle ways that their style changes. So I really like looking at Toriyama because his style looks pretty consistent at first glance. But then if you look closer, you'll realize that his earlier work, especially in Dragon Ball, which is the precursor to Dragon Ball Z, his character is not just younger, but his lines are rounder. They aren't as angular, they aren't as sharp as they become later in Dragon Ball Z. So not only is his character aging, but his style is aging with the character, with Goku specifically, right? And so I find this really interesting when looking at this image of Vegeta, because it never occurred to me how much his style changed until I'd seen this particular meme. But Vegeta is more of a cartoon in his earlier version than in his later version, right? I mean, that's kind of a different character.
He looks like he finally grew into his ears.
Oh my god! Right?
He grew into his ears. He doesn't have that boyish chin anymore. It's more of like a grown-up chin. And also, he's been pumping iron and throwing it down, and so his shoulders are broader and his neck is wider.
Yeah, he's not using a costume to compensate anymore.
Yeah, that's amazing. I never picked up on that. That is so cool.
It's something that, so it's subtle because unless you see it side by side, you probably won't notice, but literally even down to his widow's peak, it's rounder.
Oh my gosh, it's totally
than in the later one. There's far more sharp angles in the older version of Vegeta, and it makes him feel like more of a main character in a way, more of the character that we come to know him as, instead of just this one-off zany villain, which is saying something because there's a lot of zany villains.
Yes.
But I find that really cool. And I also find Isayama's difference in Attack on Titan very interesting as well. A different thing is happening here than with Toriyama. With Isayama, his style is consistent, but it just gets sharper and it gets more nuanced. He's using a fuller range of values in his later work, later in the series, versus when it first started. So, in both early examples, he's using black and white and kind of just a mid-tone gray, whatever 50% gray is, maybe 40, maybe 60, he's using one of those. But in the later work, he's using more grays in between the white and the black. So we have more gradients. In the later pieces, we have more shine on the muscles. There's a lot more articulation of the muscles of the Titan, the character designs of the Titan, and there's more articulation in the emotion on their faces even than there was before. And it's the story's not exactly starting off bright. It's a pretty dark story straight through, but as it gets darker and more intricate, even the art is getting more intricate. And this is really interesting to me about his work in particular. So we're going to do some case studies of some artists that I like. I picked them for different reasons, but this is very much my taste. But this will give you tools to be able to go study the artists you like too. And in addition to the ones I showed earlier, I will make sure to follow up with credits for those. These are the names of all the artists here, so you'll at least know the artists in this section already. So this is Victoria Gervais. She got her start doing fan art at Comic Cons. She's just an illustrator who studied in animation and illustration at Ringling College and then just started selling fan art, and that was her art career. And so these pieces are from about 5 years ago and 3 years ago, respectively. And her art's good. This is when I was introduced to her, and I really liked her big eyes. I liked that she was using all traditional art. This is actually all marker on the Disney Princess side. Wow. It's all Copic marker and other alcohol-based markers. That's
amazing.
Yeah. And
that's amazing.
She did, they're still on YouTube under the name Juicy Ink, I believe. She did art videos of using Copic markers. And so I was studying how she was working and studying how she was using markers and sort of getting tips from her. And all of her work looked like this. It was these big eyes with sort of classic animation Disney style proportions in a way. And not just her Disney princesses, but all of her work looked like this. Her anime characters looked like this and her comic characters looked like this. And then she started to get unsatisfied with her art style and actually talked about this in some of her posts and on social media. And she started experimenting with watercolor. And this interesting thing happens because she's doing fan art and it's women, right? Her subject matter is set. But there's this attitude that gets introduced with these watercolors. where she's sort of a little bit like devil may care about the watercolor washing and bleeding into each other. She's sort of enjoying how unusual the textures can be. She's letting things kind of like fade off into the background, like on Jupiter's hair. There's not really a crisp edge on that ponytail. It's sort of like fading into that color she's put in the background, but she has crisp edges elsewhere. So Jupiter doesn't get lost. Like none of these details are getting lost. It's just different. It has a different luminosity and a different texture. And so after that, she kept practicing, and this is what her work looks like now. And I find this incredibly interesting.
Wow.
She basically went from Skittles Taste the Rainbow colors to this.
Yeah. I think I'm trying to remember the term from like art school, but there's like local color where it's like, what is the actual color of it and the imagined color of what you're looking at? And like, holy moly.
Yeah. No, you're right on the money. There's a lot of local color in this one in particular, in all of these, even in the watercolors. And then she just like changes and her color palette gets a little bit more nuanced. And there's more warm grays and cool grays in some of her work. She's also showing us more of the body. There's more dynamic posing. There's a little bit more like wind and movement in her poses. They're not really just sort of like busts that are just there.
Yeah.
Even her backgrounds are a little bit more intricate, even though they're still just watercolor washes. But she's putting more unusual colors back there. Like the yellow in the figure on the right, like, I don't know. It's kind of part of her outfit. It's kind of not. It's not bothering me. It's just kind of cool because it's balancing out the pink hair and it's creating this nice harmony because those colors are around the same value, but they're different colors. So I find that really interesting about her. And then the next person who inspired me vastly to explore a number of things like animals, as you've seen, is Lee Ellickson. And she got her start, actually, like, I think she dropped out of art school. I think she totally just like stopped going to art school and decided she was just going to do pet portrait commissions and work on her sketchbook and figure out what she likes, because something about art school wasn't quite giving her what she wanted. And that's just what was right for her. So she started a YouTube, she took on commissions, she made work like this, lots of animals, using 1 or 2 ink colors, focusing a lot on some texture, but mostly form. It's like everything here is kind of shapely, especially those cats and those bottles. And she's doing good work again, but she's just using one thing. She's kind of figuring stuff out. She's figuring out her subject matter, maybe, right? And then this is her work recently and now. Again, very different, but also kind of the same. So she's still doing animals, right? She's still doing flora and fauna, and she's still using shape as her like main form of visual language. You know, like those geese are really popping from a green background. That's kind of all that is. But she's making it more nuanced by using colored pencil over watercolor and gouache and ink. She also uses ink in other pieces, but these are watercolor and gouache. She's using that to create some extra form, to create some visual interest, to push and pull with the space. With the tiger, she's using some pencils to like bring out those shadows, but that's pretty much just the white of the paper. And then she let the background do the work of pushing that tiger forward by putting that deep purple in the back and putting some of those like tree stalks in the front. But like her oranges, which I assume they're oranges, are just circles. Like there's a little bit of like an impression of what it is, but not necessarily a photorealistic version, right? Because that's becoming her visual language. Rather than spending a ton of time rendering every single shape, she seems to be more interested in the impression of shapes and bringing whatever the subject is, in this case, the main animal, forward and putting the most detail on that so it pops forward the most. So I really learned a lot about like playing with textures from her. This is the one who taught me to maybe outline my stuff with colored pencil. I was like, oh, that's interesting. When it's a colored outline, it feels different.
And it is so interesting. And it's like the first ones are strong. They're still like foreground, middle ground, and background. But like here, like you can see that like the artist has grown and it's like deepened and there's like more experimentation and like those things are still there, but it's like defined, like that
Yeah.
visual vocabulary through like the stroke and the ink. Like, it's awesome.
Right. Exactly. So this thing happens. This thing solidifies where like something consistent comes through. When you're doing your work, when you're doing your art practice, when you're studying your own style, something is staying the same throughout, but evolving. You know, your style may be changing and it's probably changing for the better. You're leaving behind what you don't need, but you're figuring out what are the things you want to carry through. For her, it was subject matter, and it was also these nice impressions of flora and fauna. But then she's doing it with more media. She's mixing her media now, and she's doing a little more texture, and she's focusing on color palettes. And those are the things that have like predominantly changed. Also, she is someone who her philosophy is I have to like what I'm making and I have to make it and I have to fill sketchbooks. Like that's her entire thing. And even if she doesn't like most of what she does, she's like, well, I did a thing and I filled another sketchbook. It's fine. It's a very nice art philosophy to have. So another artist I really like, Hey Kala, there we go. Hey Kala, they've been making work for a very long time. I'd never even seen their old work before I dug back, seeing if I wanted to use them for this presentation. And the stuff on the left is so different even from the stuff on the right. Stuff on the left is about 5 years old. And you can tell they like their characters. They like stylized characters. We're not sure what else yet, right? And then they started doing this kind of like witchy series, and they're like, okay, getting into backgrounds, and there's some texture and maybe a little bit of an obsession with light in particular, with like those focal points. And then they start doing this eventually. And like, wow, did I miss a season? Like, I have no idea. But actually, you can really see how they were playing with pushing and pulling some of those colors and some of those textures and elements. And then they started studying landscapes because they wanted to get better at backgrounds. This is something they also talked about in an art book of theirs. They wanted to get better at landscapes. They liked the style of their characters. Their characters stayed simple. They really didn't do much else. But the way in which they execute drawing them and coloring them and the setting that these characters are in has changed vastly. And this is what has kicked their art all the way up to this kind of level, where this is like very masterfully done. This is all watercolor and colored inks. They use a lot of water brushes that instead of filling it with water, they'll fill it with watered down ink so that they can create ink lines that are colorful, but are matching everything else that they're doing. And they use a lot of like white ink and white gouache to bring some of those highlights forward. But again, this is like all traditional. They just have this incredible mastery over their medium. But they're also using a lot of photo reference. They're taking pictures on their landscapes on travels, or they're finding stuff online, and they're creating a mock-up of the landscape they want to do and then putting their own character in there, using their own color palette, or making it a little bit more surreal in a way. And that's how they're making it theirs.
Yeah, that's really cool to see that evolution of like the characters. It's like, okay, well, now we see what the world they live in is. Like,
yeah, exactly. And that's a really good example of somebody working through like something they like, but it was missing something, right? Where are these characters, like you said? And then they gave them a place to live. So then I think this is the last one I have, case study, Babs Tarr. I love Babs Tarr because she did Motorcycle Sailor Moon fan art like years and years ago, and then all of a sudden was hired to do the new Batgirl, and she did Batgirl of Burnside. And I find her incredibly interesting because she's an example of like one of these newer American comic book artists that came from a manga anime background, and you can kind of see it in her work, but it changes over time. So her really early work is very much like this, kind of like she likes sultry women, she likes angular dudes, she likes characters with attitude. And her characters kind of stay the same, but once she starts doing comics, they just get a lot sharper. They get a little more interesting. Their emotions get more nuanced, and her proportions get way better. Like her just like anatomy, like her knowledge of anatomy has just gotten way better. Partly because she started doing a comic and now she's cranking out like 22 pages every couple months, right? In addition to whatever commission work she's taking on and things like that. So she's getting better rapidly because she is working more. She's just working a lot more than she was before. And this really was a turning point in her career that made her this incredible artist that does these beautiful like fan art commissions that are just sort of everything you like about American comics, you know, almost realistic proportions, but not quite. And then the boys are just kind of pretty because she comes from that manga background and the girls have great hair.
Oh, yeah.
You know,
it's such a nice look marriage,
at that. Right?
It's so amazing.
And that pose, too, is so great. And that's a tricky pose. Like, I still can't draw that.
So expressive and proportion. Like, wow.
Mm-hmm. And she uses digital and physical media. And for her comics work, she uses digital media to draw, but she inks it traditionally. So she will print out her pencils and then she'll ink it traditionally because she can get a better line. And then she has a colorist who colors her work. And that combination creates these very like clean, beautiful, very bold comics. But then her commission work is all traditional and it's really just spot color and black ink. And she's using like gradients sometimes, right? She's watering down her black ink and she's getting some of those grays. And that's what these are. So she gets to make these very fast because she needs to crank out a lot of them. But they have this beautiful range of value, you know, it's just like really nice. It's really nice.
So nice. I'm like in awe. I'm like, okay, so I just need to draw like every day.
Yeah.
Just draw every day. Like just try to get back into practice. And I think that's something that like a lot of artists struggle with is like drawing every day, like practicing every day. And then like being gentle with yourself that like it doesn't have to look perfect and be perfect. Just draw. Like just make art.
Exactly. Something one of my art professors said to me, one of my favorite professors actually in school, she was my painting professor and I did oil painting with her. You'll notice I no longer do oil paintings, but I use her lessons all the time just on other media. And one of them was quantity over quality. Make a lot of things. Don't make them perfect, you know, don't even like them, just finish them and move on to the next, because you will get better faster if you're making a lot of things. You will never get better if you're obsessing over one thing until it's perfect, or if you're never starting because you know it won't turn out the way you want to. You have to just do it. You have to just like make it like you said.
Wow.
Yeah. So this brings us to the last section, which is going to be a practical exercise and then some tips.
All right, I'm ready.
Yay. Is my PowerPoint ready? I'm not sure it was. So an exercise. I'm going to give you all a couple minutes to do this. I want you to make a list of your favorite artists, including comic artists, mangakas, illustrators, graphic designers, any visual creator. And if you can't remember their names, but there's like a favorite title you have or a favorite series or even a TV show where you like the style of the people in it, then write those down as well. Just make a list of everyone you can think of for the next like 3 minutes.
Yeah. Part of me's like, let me go on my Instagram.
I mean, that's a good idea. Yeah. Who have you been saving? Who are you liking lately?
Yeah, that's how I've been getting my like daily like art fix of like, I should be drawing. Like I should be painting.
Yeah, there's a lot of visual inspiration to find. So I'll talk a little bit while you're all making your list, just to give you some things that might spur some ideas. When you're thinking about who your favorite artists are they painters? Are they comic artists? Maybe they're animators. Maybe it's Miyazaki, for example. If there's a certain visual style you really like, maybe there's one Studio Ghibli film you particularly like. Is it someone you found on IG, or on TikTok or on Twitter? These are all places where you can find artists that are your contemporaries or people who are currently working and currently alive. And while you're writing these down, just think about, what do they make? Do you like what they draw or how they draw it? Do you like how they're doing the hair? Do you like the colors they're picking? Is there something about the subject matter you like? Maybe you like the way someone is drawing, I don't know, houses. And it's not necessarily that you're going to use the medium they're using. Maybe they're using graphite and you don't like graphite and you want to test out inks. You could look at their visual language and look at how they're doing that and try that in the media you like. Anything is valuable. What you want when you're making this list is you want a list of visual resources you can look to. And especially when you're not feeling inspired, look at that list and say, who do I want to look at today? Who do I want to like study today and study what they do or how they're doing it? And you can go to that list and it's right there and you're not getting lost in all your other social media. You just have your go-tos, right?
Yeah, you're not like, what was I looking at again?
Right, exactly. You're getting distracted by someone else. And this will guide you to be able to pick someone and then spend a little time with their style, you know, spend a little time with what they're doing. Other things that might occur to you are, do you like what they're using? Maybe you don't like somebody's subject matter. Maybe you loved Helkaila's art, but you didn't like how they draw their characters, but you really like their mastery over ink. So maybe you're going to write next to some of these names, like because I like watercolor, or because I like their subject matter, or because they draw eyes really, really nicely and I want to draw eyes like that no other way. These are all valid reasons to put someone on your list. I'm going to give you another minute and then we'll keep talking.
I'm realizing I follow like a lot of artists for like a lot of different reasons.
Yeah.
And sometimes like the styles are kind of similar or the subject matter is similar. They sometimes they overlap, sometimes they don't overlap. Sometimes it's just like, you know, that's like not my style, but I like appreciate the work they put in. Like exactly. Like there's I believe Cameron Stewart, like amazing DC comic artist. I'm just always like, wow, how did you do that?
Yeah, he's definitely someone I've looked to before specifically for inks. Like I just really like the way he renders light and shadow with only black and white. And I don't entirely understand how he does it, but that's just something that fascinates me because I don't have a mastery of that yet.
Yeah. I'm always like, it's sorcery. It's sorcery. Like there's something that you traded.
Right.
There's something you traded, or is like, I will go without XYZ for this.
But you know, for all of these artists too, like the thing they're good at that seems like magic to you is just the thing that they got obsessed with figuring out.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, it's just the thing that they either enjoyed so much or were bothered so much by that they worked at it until they were somewhat happy with it. And for all we know, they're still not, but we like it. So that's fine. So you could be, maybe you're finishing up your list, maybe you've already finished, but let's talk a little bit about what you do with this list. Why am I making you make a list right now? You go explore. You pick a day whenever you are sitting down with your sketchbook, because you're trying to sketch often. We'll talk about that in a second. And you say, I'm going to spend some time with this artist. I'm going to spend 15 minutes looking at them, writing down the things I like about them, or writing down why I want to know what they know. Oh, it's how they use oil paint. I wonder if there's any resources on how they use oil paint. Let me go see if they have a YouTube channel. Maybe they do. A lot of these artists will do tutorials and things like that. Look at how they're doing it. Try and do it the same way. Try and like copy something that they're doing. You're going to learn so much copying somebody else's lines. And because it's making your hand move away that you wouldn't have necessarily thought of before. And that is going to change how you work. You can try their subject matter. You can try their compositions. You can test out their color palettes. Maybe there's something about the color palette you don't understand that you will understand once you try and replicate it. These are all ways to try out somebody else's visual language and learn what you like so you can develop your own. And you can do this over and over with the same artist or with different artists as much as you want to the end of time. So here are some tips for developing an art style in addition to your list. Always keep a sketchbook. I have a box of them. They take up so much space. I will eventually have to get rid of them, but it is so valuable to practice. So always keep a sketchbook, because having one nearby that you can always grab will make it so much easier to have an idea and write it down. Make lists of what inspires you. It could just be like soda cans. I really like Japanese drink labels. I just think they're so cool. And I really like beer labels now, because there's a lot of like craft beers that they hire insane artists. Yeah.
Very fancy illustrations that you're like, oh, this is an adult beverage. I thought it was like something for Image Comics.
Right. Yeah. So I will find myself taking pictures of like these labels and not buying anything. I'm just going there for visual reference. Who knew the drink style? Make lists of anything that inspires you, and make lists of what to draw. This is one of my favorite tips. I have a list here called Many Little Things to Draw that I'm constantly adding to.
Nice.
And it has things on it like garden, cherry, crystals, jellyfish, ramen. I don't usually draw like dishes of food like entrees, so I thought it'd be fun to draw ramen. When you sit down and you're like, yes, I have time to draw. What do I draw? Which is a very common problem that we all have. This list will actually give you a bunch of prompts that you can just go to. Like, oh yeah, I did want to draw that. Today's the day. Makes it a lot easier to work through that moment. Experiment with different media and processes, like we talked about. If you don't know what you like, or if you're curious about something, just go test it out. Nothing is a waste. Everything can be fun. Study from life. As much as you can, study figure drawing from life, study still lifes, because that's going to give you a better sense of composition, anatomy, right? And light and shadow more than pictures will, because pictures do flatten things and illustrations do flatten things. Whereas in real life, you are going to start to see more variation in colors, more variation in light and dark. And you can take figure drawing classes online now too, and it's still valuable. You can sign up for like one-off figure drawing classes. There's free ones. There's ones that are like pay what you can. And there's also like some free YouTube channels that have figure drawing on it. There's also a website that has photos, nice figure drawing photos, called lineofaction.com, I believe. And you can set a timed class for yourself, which is very nice. So lastly, copy from masters, whether they're contemporaries that you are following that you consider a master, or old art history masters, people that have come before us. If you copy it, you will learn their visual language by doing it, as I said. You will learn from having to make their color palette, having to mix the paints, trying to layer colors the same way, trying to draw lines the way they draw lines. You will learn all of that. In summary, your style is an amalgamation of everything you like, filtered through how you see the world. Style is quantity also over quality, and you should make things and make them often and make a lot of them. You will not always be copying. If you are copying, you will eventually drift to the things that you like. And this is what will create the foundation for your style. And I think that's it. Wait, I skipped a slide. There we go. Thank you so much. Here's my Instagram and Twitter. If you want to follow me, if you have questions for me, and I believe we have time for a Q&A still, so we can answer some more questions now. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so much. That was a really great presentation. I learned a lot, and I'm like, ooh, there's some good skills that I could put into practice with like the time just a little bit of time I can put aside. I will do a plug. Sacramento Public Library, we do have physical collections of art books ranging from watercolor to ceramics to how to draw manga and anime. There's a really great book out there It's like we had like I think it's like the facial expressions book
Ooh,
is really
cool.
great, and it's just like ranging from young people to silver and gray crowd, and you can learn how to draw like wrinkles and hair and like shadows, and it's photographs and they're well lit, so you actually get form. So yeah, if you enjoyed today's presentation, we do have books at the library that you can check out and borrow for free.
I wanna actually like emphasize that when I was like first learning art, I didn't know what art books I wanted, and I had no money for art books because they're expensive.
They are,
So
yeah.
I borrowed tons and tons of resources from my local library. I live in New York. So I was at the Mulberry Street branch a lot, which is in Soho. I was also at a branch in Upper East Side. I was all over the place because different places had different art books. And it sounds like y'all have a great collection. So that would be very, very valuable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So one of the questions that came up, one of our viewers asked, how long does it take to go from the idea or sketch to the finished piece?
That's a really good question. It's going to depend on the idea or the sketch, right? It's going to depend on how much detail there is. If it's a very intricate idea, like for me, if it's a very intricate idea and I feel like my skills aren't quite where I need them to be to execute it the way I want to, then it might take me a while because I may do a lot of practice work in between the idea and the actual sketch and the finished piece. So for example, if I'm doing a landscape and I'm not familiar with some of the things I would draw in it, or maybe a better example of this is a cityscape and I want it to look like a specific city, I might do some studies of how the city looks, and I might do some like little thumbnail tests, like very quick little sketches of the overall composition I want. And then I may also work out whatever pose I'm working with, if it's like a character piece in the middle of a cityscape, and spend more time on that than I'm even going to spend on the final sketch, just because that is where the work is. You're trying to get a lot of it right. So it can vary, but you take the time you need to get the results you want.
Yeah. So it looks like one of our librarians was being a very good librarian and asked a really great question.
Uh-huh.
We have an app called Overdrive, which is one of our digital apps that you can get with a library card. And it's like, does Overdrive have figure drawing classes? And we have Gale courses, which is on our website, has beginner art. Ooh. So something to check out, cool. saclibrary.org. I believe it's under education and then databases. But that's a really great place.
That's a great resource.
Yeah, there's a lot of like little unearthed secrets. We do a lot of things. So it looks like if you go to our website, you go to education and let's see, you go to online learning and then databases. Yeah, and we have awesome. A lot of things. And so we do have the artist works, which is more of music. But if you scroll down, it looks like there's the Gale courses, which are 6-week online classes, completely free. Yay, libraries.
So incredible. I love stuff like that. It makes a huge difference.
Yeah. And talking about the art books, I remember like the Christopher Hart books. It was just like this. Oh yeah. This guy he drew everything. He drew everything.
He knows how to do anything.
He's like, draw cartoon characters, draw automobiles, like draw dinosaurs, and just being like, okay, I'm going to try this.
Yeah.
Yeah. One of the questions I had for you, well, let's see. I remember like in the 90s, like, it's like, I want to draw this thing, but I don't have like a book or a magazine. And it's just like, where do I figure this out? And it's just like Google Images. Now we have Google Images.
Yeah.
And so anything you can imagine is on there.
Yeah. It was really hard finding the reference material I wanted when I was a little bit younger, because I didn't have the internet for like most of my teen years. It's just not something we had at home. I went to the library a lot to use computers too. That's another reason why I was there all the time. And I would look up characters I liked or like images I needed, and would even like print them out at the library, like wherever I could, because that was the easiest way for me to get resources. But now we all have a lot easier access to internet, whether it's at the library or at home, and Google Images and places like Pinterest and like even just dedicated blogs to things are so much easier to use. I also like follow like Instagram accounts that are like landscape photography or like fashion photography.
Snap.
And things
Yeah.
like that. I have a little, because they have that folder system now where you can like save things to different categories. I have one that's specifically for reference, and that's where I'll put accounts that like have good reference material. And if you're using someone's reference and you're going to post it, it's always like good form to message them, you know, and just make sure it's okay with them. You can always use images for your own purposes, but if you're going to post it, and especially if it's like something you'd eventually want to sell, it's just nicer to do that. But that's just like a really great way to have access to a lot of like visual stimulation.
Yes. And we will, like, ask the librarian, we will make copies for you from a book. We will print for you. That's what we're here for. Just want to do that plug. I was going to ask, what was the, what came first, the love of manga and anime or the drawing and cartooning? Like, which came first?
So, truly a chicken or egg question.
Yeah.
But so, they were sort of at the same time they converged. And here's why I'm saying that. I'd always drawn or painted. I was just sort of one of these obsessive, crafty kids, like ever since I could remember. Like I liked gluing things. I liked scribbling things. I liked using my hands. I still do. I do a lot of crafts now still. But I got serious about wanting to be good at art when I started reading more manga. Like that's truly how that happened. I started watching Sailor Moon and Pokemon. A year or two later, Shonen Jump started to be published in English, and I got a subscription to it. It was the only subscription I ever had to anything. It was Shonen Jump. And then Shoujo Beat, which was the shoujo version of Shonen Jump. And just having that easy access to manga and being able to like read that and look at the pictures and then try and copy from that was how I started developing my visual style before I even knew what I was doing. So that's how that worked for me. And then I just got more and more obsessed with media and by media, I mean like paints, like different kinds of paints. I'm very fascinated with how they all work, the different way media is created, just like the way you have to adjust how you use things. I just think it's fun. So,
yeah. Do you have any tips on how to obtain art supplies when you're on a tight budget or you want to explore something new?
Oh yeah, that's a really good one. It's hard to find these, but sometimes there are places that specifically sell like recycled art supplies. Like there will be secondhand places that will sell like almost new sets if they come in. So it is worth seeing if there's any in your neighborhood. I think they're usually like specialized in that. But the easier option is think about what you like and try and find the student grade version of it. So student grade versions are just like a fancy way of saying, what is the less expensive version of this media? And really nice brands have student grade materials. So like Winsor & Newton, which is notoriously expensive, has student grade watercolor that comes in like tiny, tiny tubes, but they're still really nice. So if you're like set on watercolor, but you have a really tight budget, then you could just get 2 of those tiny tubes, which are not going to be very expensive, 1 brush, and then a cup of water and some like student grade small watercolor paper. The smaller ones are going to be cheaper, even if they're a nice watercolor grade, or a sketchbook that can take ink wash. That's also like a little more cost effective, and use that. And that's a way to like work with really nice supplies and be able to like keep it under a certain amount. But also you don't need fancy supplies. Like any pencil, any colored pencils you can find, any sketchbook you can find. I would just say, maybe don't draw on lined paper. That tends to be very thin and tears easily, but like get a really inexpensive sketchbook, get some like low level, very inexpensive art supplies, go on websites and see if there's a sale on some set of markers or something if you want to try markers, and just use what you have, because you're going to get better as long as you are doing art often. You could use a ballpoint pen for the next 12 months. And then when you have a little more money, then you can spend money on art supplies, but you don't need more than that right now.
And just a shout out to illustrator Rollo III, who has been able to make his whole career on ballpoint pen illustrations for the writers in space. And it's just like, it's amazing. It's just a ballpoint pen. And it's amazing.
There's also a comic artist named Emil Ferris who made an entire book called My Favorite Thing is Monsters out of ballpoint pen. And it's incredible work that she's done. So yeah, a Sharpie too. Sharpies are great. Mm-hmm. That's black air, that's black ink. You can just use that.
Mm-hmm. I'm thinking about like all the times I've been like, can I have art supplies for Christmas, art supplies for birthdays? It's like the way to do it. And then just like, sorry, Rose Art, but like your quality is not that great. But there are student grade. Yeah, there are student grade ones that you can get without breaking the bank. I think
Reeves Art Supply not Reeves Art Supply, the brand Reeves, Reeves. It's very inexpensive art supplies, but they're okay quality. Like they're good enough for practice. They're sort of like one step above Rose Art and one step under student grade stuff, which is nice.
Yeah. And then the question that gets asked a lot, and I always like put it forward, is do you recommend that people go to art school or art classes, or is making art something that can be separate from that? What's your take on that?
I love this question so much, and I'm not going to give a very easy answer because there isn't one. I would say it's very individual. I am someone who excelled from having classes because I do well with projects, I do well with prompts, I needed direction. And I also wanted to get a degree and I didn't have internet at home. So it really gave me access to something that I didn't have access to in other ways. Now I would probably just teach myself via online tutorials, via free resources, through some of the exercises I've given. I wouldn't necessarily go to art school now, but I think it's very individual. In art school, you're going to meet other people who are artists. There's sort of no replacing that. I mean, you can meet artists online, but there is something about like being in a space together, when it's safe again, being in a space together, working on stuff and having the same deadlines. That was something that was very valuable to me about graduate school. Graduate school was also very expensive, and like I can't necessarily justify the cost for what I got out of it in terms of financial stability. So you should go for art and think about art school if you feel like you want professors who are going to guide you, you want that kind of mentorship, you want the camaraderie of the classmates, and you want that structure. If you are someone who is good at giving yourself that structure and you have the discipline to do it yourself, you absolutely can. Lee Ellickson, who I showed you, is doing very well for herself as an artist, and she like dipped after year 2. She was like, this is not for me. I'm figuring this out myself, and she's fine.
Yeah, thank you for answering that. Do you like, and then this is also like an opinion question, like, do you think it's possible to learn things from, like, is it possible to learn an art practice through like community college classes or like local programming?
Yeah.
Like,
I love this question too, because I got my undergraduate degree is in fine arts, in studio arts. It's very fancy. It's from Brooklyn College. That is a city university. It's the City University of New York, and we have 6 of them, I believe. And Brooklyn College is the one that had the more robust art program out of all the city universities. So I didn't have a lot of money growing up. And I qualified for a lot of financial aid at the city universities because I'm someone who lives in New York and who didn't have a lot of money. And I could take liberal arts classes, but then also take their BFA art course. And I thought that was very valuable. It didn't really break the bank. Again, I spent my money in grad school, and that's a whole other story.
Yeah.
But I truly believe in community colleges, in city universities, in state universities. I think it's about the program. You have to research the program and who's teaching. In the case of Brooklyn College, they were all part-time teachers who were teaching at the private art schools around here. So like I was getting the same education theoretically, but at a city university price. I also took free classes at museums when I was a teenager. And that's how I learned a lot of like watercolor and pastel, was just from like going to those classes once a week. Like one of them was every Sunday. There was another one I took that was every Thursday. I think those are totally valid ways to do it. Consistency is really the thing you're looking for. How you get it, whether it's through a degree you're getting already, if you're going to a liberal arts school or a state university, or if it's just how you're spending your Wednesday night, like it's all valid. It's going to give you the same amount of practice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we probably have like middle schoolers and high schoolers, and some of our schools have art programs, and some of them don't. Like any words of wisdom or advice, or like other creative ways that we haven't talked about in regards to art practice and getting that experience?
Yeah, let's I'm going to talk for one more second, because I don't think I like really went into it. But like the value of like YouTube is like just a free social media video platform. And a lot of artists find a lot of joy in sharing their art process and in talking about what they do. And everything I learned since undergrad, I learned basically through other artists via YouTube or other like video platforms, but mainly YouTube. And the thing is that you can follow their journey, listen to what they're talking about, practice alongside them, even just put them on for company. And you are able to sort of like start your own practice, and get into it that way. And it exposes you to a community of people, of these figures that are like sharing their work openly. And it gives you some of that knowledge, even if you're not getting it from your school, or if you're not like going to a specific class for it. That's something that you can get straight in your home if you have access to internet and have a laptop.
Okay. And it looks like we only have like 1 minute left. You have your Instagram and Twitter handles on there. What can we expect to see on your social media in the future? Like any projects you can tell us about, or commissions?
Oh, yeah, that's a fun question. Well, I'm working on writing some graphic novels actually, but some of them are for Webtoon, which is an online comics publishing platform. So I will be going back to my webcomic later this year or early next year. I will be also posting a lot more paintings. I think I'm going to do veggies now and some more fan art.
All right.
I post a lot of 15-second to 30-second art videos on my Instagram in particular. So if you liked the process videos, you will see a lot more of that on my feed. So many colors, some stories, and fan art occasionally is what you can expect.
Awesome. Well, congratulations on getting onto Webtoon too, because that reaches a lot of people.
Yeah, it's a very cool, very different experience, but I love having it. And if you do follow me on Instagram or Twitter, there will be links to the webcomic there if you are interested in reading any of my work. So yeah, and again, if anyone ever has a question, I am very friendly on the internet. I will always answer it. If you're like, what is the difference between oil paint and watercolor? Again, I can only pick one. I will talk to you about it. I'm just happy to chat with people.
Yeah, looking forward to see that in the Instagram story. It's just like more satisfying gouache paintings and layering and colored pencil shading. Like, yay!
Yes,
a feast for the eyes. Yay. So it looks like we're at time. I don't see more questions in the chat. Samia, thank you so much for being with us today with Sacramento Public Library and our teen virtual programming. We really appreciate you being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I've had a glorious time and it's an absolute pleasure to be here. So thanks for having me.
Yeah, and we definitely need to connect. I do remember the question about like the artists that you had talked about in the very beginning.
Yep. I will get that to you.
Awesome. And we'll have to put a link in there. Not to put you on the spot, but are these slides available on social media? Can we poke you for them?
Oh, yes. So I thought you were asking about the credit, which is why I went to this for legal reasons. This is the creator of the slideshow. But I would be happy to provide this slideshow to your team, and you may share it with your attendants, with anyone who needs it. And I will also provide a list of the Instagram artists when I do that too.
Awesome. Yay. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Once again, this is Monica from Sacramento Public Library, where books are just the beginning. Thanks for joining us. Join us next week for our, sorry, I'm like, what is it called? We are doing another Artist Alley segment next week after our anime trivia. So join us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube, 4 p.m. We'll see you there. And we'll see you next time, y'all.
Bye.